On today's episode of the CHGO Cubs podcast, Kyle Tucker is a Chicago Cub. Cody Bellinger is a New York Yankee. Where do the Cubs go in the pitching market if the Jesus Luzardo talks are off? We're talking Zips projections and more. Stay tuned for this episode of the CHGO Cubs podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs podcast, and we are coming to you live on this Sunnyside Friday. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HIGHCHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 or older or Illinois Med Card holders. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Friday, December 20th. And Brendan, I'm going to jump right to it because when you and I last spoke, and I believe our episode went live on Friday with plenty of time to still be fresh, but then like an hour later, we got the official news that Kyle Tucker is a Chicago Cub. So this is you and I's first time speaking to the audience where the Cubs have a top 10, top 5, top 4 hitter in Major League Baseball.
Kind of surreal. Maybe their most significant trade in the last 10, 15 years. In terms of projected value, it is their most significant trade they've made in our lifetimes in terms of projecting guys back. It feels good. It feels like they have a safety reserve in place. And that was the big sticking point for us over the last few years. When the Cubs performed poorly or went through poor stretches, they did not have an anchor to keep them afloat. Kyle Tucker is that anchor. Yeah. They gave up Isaac Paredes. They gave up Cam Smith, your guy, Hayden Wesneski. And we'll talk about all that, but that was to be expected. That's the value. That's maybe the expected outcome for any package of someone like Kyle Tucker's value. It makes a lot of sense. I feel great even 1 week later talking about this.
I can't get over it, dude. I keep looking at their lineup. I keep looking at the tweets and just like sort of typing it out every time. Like Kyle Tucker. Like this is our guy.
And when you see it in like the Zips projections, and then you start adding up the wins.
And those projections I think are conservative on him.
Absolutely conservative.
We'll get into that.
Get into that. Yeah. I mean, when you have a range like 8+ WAR, at is like 90th percentile outcome, superstar.
I think you and I kind of laid out our preemptive feelings because at the time we recorded last week, the package we were discussing hypothetically.
Well, we nailed it.
Was basically what ended up happening. Yeah. So it was easy for us to kind of like preemptively give our thoughts, not knowing that that's exactly
what that's why they made the deal. They said, "Oh, you know, Corey and Brennan."
Jed was like, "All right, they signed off. We can go." Yeah.
30 minutes later.
But yeah, I'm fine with the package. We don't have to even talk about that. Like the Cubs got their superstar, and you pair it with the move later in the week to move Bellinger and clear the money, which we'll talk about. I know Cody and Luke talked about it earlier in the week, but like we'll give our thoughts on that and like how they all pair together. But the important thing was this was the opportunity that a star level player, not a good player, not a great player, like one of the best hitters in this league, a 5-tool player, however you want to describe Kyle Tucker, he was available. You had what Houston was looking for, and Jed pulled the trigger. I give him a lot of credit for that. I think I don't count myself as one of his biggest detractors, but I certainly expressed that I didn't really believe he had something like this in him, like the call it courage, right? To pull the trigger, trade a very high rising prospect, trade a guy that you just got, and creating some uncertainty at a position at third base that you brought in Paredes specifically to kind of like shore up and clear up. I give Jed a lot of credit for making this move. It's the right move. It's a good move. And, again, we talked about it last week. I don't care about the 1 year. I want him here long term. But this is the process. These are how these things go. And if you waited until he hit the open market, you may never get him in pinstripes playing at Wrigley Field. Now you guarantee that for a year, and you also have a full year plus these 4 or 5 months of exclusive negotiating time and convincing and pitching for him to stay here long term, which Jed expressed interest in, Kyle Tucker expressed interest in. So for now, we just have to hope that that's the long-term thing and just sit back and enjoy that. When you look at that lineup, it's, you're not looking at like, all right, well, who's going to be, as you said, the guy that carries this team, the absolute star. And we always compared it to the Dodgers. Now the Dodgers have, 3 of these guys, but we always compared it to them, that you looked at that lineup and it could ebb and flow from the 4 spot down, and especially in the bottom of the order. Maybe it's a young guy. Maybe it's Jason Hayward they were throwing out there at certain
Star
times.
Jason Hayward.
Right. But it's all buoyed by these stars at the top. And the Cubs desperately needed that, and they got it. And also, Brendan, we talked about it in the context of wanting them to make a move like this and needing them to get a star. But how nice is it to look at this lineup and look at Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki and Dansby Swanson and what their contributions are, not in the context of needing one of those people to be the best hitter in your lineup. Kyle Tucker's got that taken care of. Whatever those guys do is gravy.
That's the advantage of having a roster built around someone with that consolidation of war. That's not my phrase, by the way. Consolidation of war is how Jed Hoyer described that.
I like that.
Him and his baseball executive terminology. I also want to add to your point about the whole free agency and Kyle Tucker. And of course, we're coming off Juan Soto leaving the Yankees on a similar 1-year deal after being traded. There's value in having a player in your organization in determining the length or the amount of your extension you want to give. Maybe in a bad case outcome, Kyle Tucker comes in, they have proprietary data on him, and they make a decision, you know what, maybe this is not in the best interest. Not saying it's going to happen, but there is a recent example of this. And the example is Chris Bryant when he was acquired by the Giants. Chris Bryant traded, of course, from the Cubs to the Giants. And when he left San Fran, there was reports they did not like his swing mechanics, and they thought that would age poorly. And he was ultimately not brought back, went to Colorado, and he's had some injuries over the past several years. Not saying that's going to happen to Kyle Tucker, but it is part of the discussion of the value you gain when you acquire someone with that consolidation of war and the additive information of a player of his quality in your system that helps you determine if you want to and how much you want to give that player for an extension.
That's such you're right, but it's such a Brendan, qualifier to them getting a star. It's good to get him in the building so that they can negotiate or decide they don't like him.
I'm just saying there's pushback because everyone's like, oh, you're going to trade him. You're going to get rid of that for 1 year. It's like, no, that information is valuable. That should be part of the discussion.
No, I know what you mean.
That's why Bellinger was also extended too.
Yeah. So, again, we'll see. There's work
throwing me under the bus over there
in this offseason. And I think that I expect that they're going to do it. If you're going to make this move for Kyle Tucker and you don't have him locked up long term, you want 2025 to be a productive year. And that was part of the reason that even in a vacuum, no idea of an extension or not, last week, I was hoping the move got made. Because as we've said, 2025 matters. Every year matters. This is not an organization that has been perennially winning the division and winning championships to the point where you can say it's okay if 1 year is a step back or a reset or whatever. Like, you haven't been making the playoffs. You haven't been doing these things. So 2025 matters, and making this a great team matters and should be part of the focus of this front office. They've spent several years thinking of the future in basically all of the moves that they make. It's okay for some of the moves to, for now, only improve the present. That's okay. This season matters just the same as 2026 or 2027 or 2045. Like, this is an opportunity to win a championship in a weak and getting cheaper division. Go for it. And Kyle Tucker is a massive, massive step towards doing that.
But it's also not hemorrhaging your future. Of course, the pushback I was alluding to was, Isaac Paredes is under team control for 3 more years. Hayden Wesneski has pitched significant big league innings. Cam Smith is maybe going to be Houston's number 1 prospect, if not by 1, 2, 3 outlets, but unanimously by the end of the season. That's the pushback. But put yourself in your July Cubs fandom. In July, Christopher Morel was going through a significant slump. His defense at third base was a huge question mark. Cam Smith was not even in your brain. You probably had no idea who Cam Smith was. Hayden Wesneski was taking the bus back into Iowa, had injuries. All 3 of those guys were not even at the forefront of your thinking process. Those 3 players make up Kyle Tucker today. And of course, it's not like that. There's value gained from Cam Smith's explosion after he was drafted. But the perspective, I think, is fair from a fan's point of view. Kyle Tucker, for 3 pieces who were not integrally part of your thinking process, should be a huge mental boost for your fandom. It is for mine. That's the way I view it, at least.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, gave our thoughts on this, but I did just want to start this show again, because it's our first time on air since Kyle Tucker's a Cub. Like, it's difficult, Brendan. I wonder how many conversations you and I had over the years, like, where we were like, where's our Paul Goldschmidt trade? Where's our Nolan Arenado trade? Where's our Mookie Betts trade? And it happened. It was like crazy on Friday morning. Kind of at that point, it really seemed like a foregone conclusion. But like, reading the pass and tweet and like seeing the Cubs tweeting out an image with King Tuck, as they called him. Like,
I like that.
It was like a little surreal, you know?
It
still
like one hasn't of those quite sunk in yet.
Yeah, like you kind of like dream about it and think about it, and you're like, wow, okay, they did it. Like, there's your superstar. There he is.
And Tucker did say when he was doing his Zoom opening conference that he's open to an extension, like, I guess, at any point right now. So even during the season, perhaps. So for fans who are worried about the extension stuff, like, that's still a possibility. And the one thing I will say before we move on here, like, the Cubs are looking to be a good baseball team next year. Even the current projections we talked about for the past 4 months of this offseason at the end of 2024, that if they can get to 90 wins, that would be, I guess, relatively okay. And I did not even believe it to be attainable. That trade of Tucker is exactly the type of trade that now makes 90 wins attainable. And not just attainable, but actually like almost likely if they make a few more deals. Mm-hmm. And that is crazy to think about, because I genuinely did not expect them to be able to do that and improve their team by 7, 8, maybe even 9 more by opening day.
Well, and that's how we'll talk about, the Cody Bellinger trade, right, and just what that money does and what that decision does and stuff like that. But yeah, look, Brendan, I can't get over it. I'm like elated by this. It's just, it's really fun. I seeing the photos today from like the team store, Kyle Tucker's like official jersey. Looks like he's
got the names are bigger again. Did you notice that on the jersey? The text.
I thought that still looked kind of small.
Oh, really? I thought they looked bigger. Go on the MLB.com shop.
And am I misremembering, or is it Ted Lilly 30?
Yeah, I think so. 30 or 31.
I know. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, it's definitely a 3 in there. I mean, they both have very similar swing paths. So
great. Yeah, but either way, just seeing all of that, and I think we'll get, obviously his first real introduction, putting on the jersey, doing the whole thing at CubsCon in January. But just having a player like that, it's been very, very exciting to, like I said, go through all of the exercises, looking through the potential lineups that people are, kind of playing around with, watching his highlight videos, and just reading the way that a lot of experts and writers and podcasters talked about the Cubs on that day. Of just like, gee, finally, like, here's their big move. Like, this is the move they've been waiting for. It was exciting. And I really haven't, I don't know that I've gotten over it. I don't know that I will get over it until we're watching him play at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. And then hopefully by that point, Brendan, he's competing for an NL MVP award. And we just sort of get to live in this like blissful existence of being a Cubs fan for a little while.
Do you think Sammy Sosa will teach him how to run out to right field at CubsCon?
I think there's a lot of good vibes with bringing back your old right fielder and welcoming a new one. It feels really good.
It feels really good.
I'm very happy with the Cubs right field situation currently and related to the past. It's been a good week for that.
And for those who are not aware, Sammy Sosa issued an apology statement, an apology statement. Tom Ricketts welcomed him back to CubsCon and Wrigley Field next year. So Sammy Sosa is back in the Cubs organization. That's what we're looking at.
We'll touch on that for sure when we come out of this break, but we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors here, and we will be back to talk more Cubs.
With Empire today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. Empire today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats, but Empire cannot be beaten on quality, service, speed. So competitors advertise low-quality products that Empire simply will not carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does is putting flooring in their home they would not put in their own home. They have a virtual floor designer, which is a great way to see how new floors will look in any space. It's easy. Just snap a picture and instantly you see how new floors will look in your room. They pride themselves on their convenient shop at home service. They help customers shop for floors where they use their floors so they can see exactly what their new floors will look like in their homes, lighting and decor, so they can make an informed decision. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasoned recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Every HelloFresh recipe includes high-quality, sustainably sourced ingredients like produce that comes fresh from the farm. Save valuable time during the busy holiday season with fewer trips to the grocery store. Thanks to HelloFresh Market, there's over 100 added items that you can add to your weekly box, like quick breakfast, packable snacks, beverages, and more. For me, I get home late. I don't want to cook. I don't want to go through all the mental drama of trying to get things together. HelloFresh makes my life easier, Corey. You can get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free Cubs. Applied across 7 boxes. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com and use code FREECUBS.
All right, Brendan. Let's talk. I do want to. Let's just stick on Sammy Sosa for a second. Like
briefly, we've given our thoughts and everything. We got a lot of Zips projections, but we'll touch on it briefly.
Yeah, I'm just glad that happened. I know some people are like, why did he have to write that note, and like, why did the Ricketts even care? You can get into that. Like, I agree with all that, but like, I'm just glad he's back. He was a huge part of my childhood. I know your childhood. And for a lot of people that grew up in a certain time period, like, he is the reason that they are Cubs fans. Watching him nationally on WGN, competing with Mark McGwire, all that, like, he's just a huge story he's a huge chapter in the book of the Chicago Cubs, and not having him around has always felt really weird and just not right. It just doesn't, all those, when they bring back the legends in, what is that, the 4th or 5th inning at Wrigley Field, like, it's awesome going to the games and randomly, like, Derek Lee is there or Aramis Ramirez is there. And I know, for a different generation of folks, like, seeing guys like Billy Williams, Fergie Jenkins, and, it's cool to me too, but obviously I didn't grow up with those guys. like Sammy's got to be there. Like when they're in playoff games and celebrities and people are throwing first pitches and stuff, like that ought to be Sammy Sosa at least some of the time. So I'm really glad that this has happened. I think it's going to make for some really fun moments, hopefully, depending on, to what degree he's back in the good graces of the organization and stuff like that. But I'm just happy about it.
I mean, he's going to get an unbelievably loud standing ovation. One of the best standing ovations probably in Wrigley Field history.
Yeah. So I look forward to that. And like I said, just really good, like synchronicity here. Cleaning up your relationship with your old right fielder, bringing in a new one, like just feels
Let's
nice.
Go find Rizzo. Nice. Bring Rizzo back too. Let's just do it all, Sure. Let Theo buy the Cubs too. Forget Boston, the ownership.
Well, yeah. Now we're cooking with gas.
Well, that will happen in 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure also if you're looking for more Sammy Sosa talk, like our guy Cody Delmendo will have that handled. This has been basically a campaign of his for quite some time. He's not alone in that, but I know he was quite happy to receive this news. So big day for him. Let's talk like. We don't have to, relitigate like the entirety of the Cody Bellinger trade, but just sort of the process and where it leaves us in this Cubs offseason. And, this was something that seemed to be a foregone conclusion, basically from the minute that he opted in. And certainly it ramped up in recent weeks, clearly coinciding with the Cubs doing this Kyle Tucker stuff behind the scenes. I don't really have a problem with it. I think in a certain world, would it be nice if the Cubs just absorbed the money and said, yeah, sure, we're going to have a really expensive utility man, or we're going to have to figure out where all these guys play. Like, so what if we're paying Cody Bellinger this money and, the performance is like it was last year, or we're, putting him in the outfield sometimes, or first base sometimes, or DH sometimes. Like, yeah, I suppose. But again, like at a certain point, the Cubs are operating with a certain budget, whether we like it or not. And we don't really need to like go down that road every time we talk about this stuff. I think what they're doing, Brendan, pretty clearly is they want these opportunities at first base to go to Michael Busch. They want room for Seiya Suzuki to be either spelling guys in the outfield or participating at DH, whether he and his agent are pleased with that or not, and having the runway for a guy like Matt Shaw to earn himself a job and be getting regular cracks at that lineup. And then obviously PCA in center field just belonging to him. And, so I think a lot of people were looking at it as kind of like the Cubs giving away a good player and stuff, which is part of the story. But one, they need to use that money. If they're operating on a budget, whether we like it or not, they need to shore up the rest of the pitching staff and potentially depth on offense, which they need money for. And so that's what they just got. And so the question isn't like just giving away a good player. They did get someone in return that I know you're at least like moderately intrigued by in Poteet. But like it's an opportunity cost thing. If you keep Bellinger, that means these other guys have to play less, or you have to finesse more how everyone is playing and where they're starting. So the trade-off is just more opportunities for those guys, which doesn't inherently mean a subtraction of production for the Cubs, or as direct as was being discussed by some people. You're not just taking away Bellinger's production. You're giving those opportunities to other people, some of whom were better than Cody Bellinger last year.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
You're giving more at bats to guys who would otherwise have at bats taken away, and specifically that's Michael Busch. That's why later on when we talk about the whole, are they a 90 win projection based on what came out, part of the win projections calculates playing time. And with Busch and Bellinger, they had overlapping value projections, which means when you substitute out Bellinger, then you input more Busch, and Busch's projections were almost identical from an offensive standpoint. That's why it's hardly a difference. And I imagine that's also why the front office thought even to trade Bellinger in addition to freeing up salary. My preference would be to keep Bellinger in a perfect world, and we go well above the luxury tax. We don't think about this. The reason for that is, well, they shore first base in case Bush does have a sophomore slump. You also have an insurance policy should PCA go through a slump, or even if anyone gets injured. And even in a worst case scenario, you can always move over Bush in an emergency scenario at third base if there's injuries or poor performances. So that would be my path forward. That's not the reality we live in. The reality we live in now is by trading Bellinger, they are about 50 million, give or take 40, 50 million underneath that first year of the luxury tax, according to MLB COTS or roster resource. That means they can use that money now, input more Michael Bush at bats, and shore up their back end of their bullpen, which is what the rumors and the beats are talking about, or use that money for starting pitching depth in the form of more free agent signings or trading, let's say, for someone from Seattle, Luis Castillo, Pablo Lopez from Minnesota. That's where the money should be spent. There's pessimism that it won't be spent, but because they are 50 million away from that first tier, they're likely going to shrink that up. By how much? We'll see. They barely went over last year. If they do the same thing again this year, well, they're going to have to spend that 50 million somehow.
Yeah. So, again, like, is this in an ideal world how they would operate? Like, probably not. But I think in terms of where reality is, this makes a lot of sense, and they can better utilize that money. I mean, again, like Michael Bush he was a rookie last year, did not have a particularly good second half relative to his first half. So there's definitely like thoughts and, potential risk and things like that. But if you're the Cubs front office and you had a rookie that you traded for, you paid a decent price for Michael Bush, and you gave him an opportunity, he puts up a 119 WRC plus and then 2.3 wins above replacement, got a lot better at first base, by the way, as the year went on.
Jed described him as a gold glove.
Yeah, like defender. Very stellar over there by the end of the year. If your question is, do we roll with that primarily at first base? Now, I understand that Bellinger plays more than first base, but do we roll with that, or do we keep the guy making $20-something million more who had a 109 WRC plus and 2.2 wins above replacement? So lower WRC plus, slightly lower WAR. Like, that's a no-brainer if you're a front office. Like, again, we can talk about like how they spend money and whether they should use the first tier of the luxury tax as a budget, but it doesn't matter. If they are, they are. So that's how we have to discuss things. So when you're looking at it, it's like, that's a no-brainer. You take the way cheaper, younger, cost-controlled option, and you say, our priority is giving this guy playing time and hoping that he continues to develop and gets even better as our first baseman for the next several years, rather than prioritizing a guy that's making a lot more money than that. And they can use that money to shore up the bullpen, shore up the rotation, and get depth on this bench, which when we look at these projections, and we talked about it, I think in the weeks past, like, I think I said, if you're not going to go get a star, at the very least, clean up the bottom of the roster. They did get the star, and I think they can do both. So you get the star in Kyle Tucker, and sure, you're taking a little bit of a risk in seeing, like, how does PCA do in this full year in center field? How does Michael Bush do in his second year? What if you give a significant amount of playing time to Matt Shaw? Of course, there's risk there. Like, it could go any way. But when you have the star, if you can clean up this roster to the point that you're no longer trotting out 3 sub-replacement level players for your 7, 8, 9 hitters every day or every other day, which is something they've genuinely done at better parts of the last few years, it makes the rest of the team a lot better. And that doesn't mean you need like guys that you're just, thrilled at looking at your 8 hitter or whatever it is, but they've rolled out a lot of garbage over the last few years, Brendan. Like, and if you can clean that up to just more like league average players,
I'm
like
asking for even slightly below league average.
Yeah, just like
not replacement.
Negative WAR players at multiple positions at the same time,
and paying some of them $5-10 million.
Yeah, it makes the entire roster a lot better. And when we talk about the bullpen in particular, like, we're not like philosophically big, like, let's give multi-year deals to relievers and spend a bunch of money on that. but it's a similar line of thinking. You really struggled relying on a small number of guys the last couple of years. And then when they got hurt, you had to thrust a bunch of other guys into new positions, let them adjust and kind of see how they found their footing. Like you had a couple of like solid bullpen guys, like genuinely, truly solid, reliable arms. It makes Porter Hodge better. It makes the entire bullpen better. Everything trickles down a little bit. Yeah. And it just strengthens that depth. And that's not something they've had the last couple of years. And if they can use this money that they already had in their budget, but now additionally with trading Cody Bellinger, I think ultimately at the end of the offseason, they will become a better team for it. I understand like when it happened, a lot of people were like, wait a minute, we just brought somebody in. Now we're trading.
Petit? Who is this guy?
Like, what's the deal? But I think it makes a lot of sense and is a good decision from this Cubs front office if and assuming they reallocate this money.
That's the assumption.
Yeah, and make the rest of this team deeper and better. I think they'll end up better for it.
Yeah. For the little quick 60-second tidbit, the risks that I interpret when I hear you talk about, okay, you trade Bellinger, then you risk maybe a little bit of PCA, you risk a little bit of Bush. Specifically for me, that risk is in the form of not having the safety net. And you do lower your floor. I want to be clear with that. Bellinger raises your floor, Bush lowers your floor. And specifically, if you just look at this graph here, this is showing whiffs across the season. This is Dansby Swanson, Ian Happ, Michael Bush. The reason I'm showing these three guys, they have the same overall whiff rates. And do you see they basically fluctuate at similar rates, right? They all look very similar across the season. Now, if you look at their exit velo, then you start seeing greater peaks and valleys. And here it is. So here's the peaks and valleys. In green is Michael Bush. You can see that there's greater variance throughout the season. So for someone who does not whiff, or rather for someone who whiffs as much as Dansby and Ian Happ, their power outputs need to be a little bit higher. And for Dansby and Ian, they're 25-ish or so home run guys. Bush needs to also be that, but his profile of like hard hit contact and swing speed doesn't necessarily look like those two players. And that's why for me, there's a little bit of a risk there that I'm not quite confident in, but it can still work out. And that's why I would rather have the Cubs just spend a bunch of money and elevate that floor. That being said, let's say Bush does perform like he did last year. Well, then you're paying for the same value at pre-arb rates for $30 million cheaper. Then that snowballs to 2026, 2027. That's the risk they're playing. I understand that risk. And there is legitimate rationale to that, even though on paper, trading Bellinger looks like a, what the hell are they doing type moment. All right. Let's do our quick ad break.
We'll hit our ad break here, and then let's talk Zips projections.
Zips. Everyone loves Zips projections. Game time. Game time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. Game time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching for thousands of tickets. They have curated deals that make it easier to find the best price on great seats. You can view your seats before you buy. They have their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection. I don't use any other ticketing websites. I think, okay, I want to go to a game. I want to go to an event. I just use the Game Time app. I don't even think about using anything else. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. For the best way to end 2024, head to Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and shop the Wrap Up the Year sales event to score some of the year's best savings on new vehicles. Before the clock strikes 2025, hurry into Ray CDJR to browse our huge inventory of new vehicles, and right now celebrate the end of 2024 with $24,000 off MSRP on select new vehicles with a dealer discount, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. Let the team at Ray CDJR help you during each step of your car shopping journey. With Ray's Price Promise, the numbers you're hearing now are the same prices you can expect to shop in-store and online. That's because Ray's Price Promise means no price changing, no add add-ons and no hidden fees since they prioritize affordability for their customers. Hurry into Raise CDJR today and shop one of Chicago's largest inventories, then drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, you have to check out the team at Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram because they're the only team we recommend. So visit them today at Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com. Serving the community since 1963.
All right, Brendan. So let's talk projections. So we talked so much about needing them to get in a place where they were projected not just to be a low 80s fringe division competitor, fringe playoff team competitor, even in a 3 wild card system, and also discussing like why they were routinely landing in that spot and it not really being an accident that they were routinely being looked at by these systems as kind of a slightly around 500, give or take a few games, like a little below, a little above, depends on how things go. But that's kind of where they believe they sit. What are we looking at now that the Cubs have Kyle Tucker?
So the projections, I think, surprise most fans from an individual player perspective. And so the Zips projections are one of many. You have Zips, you have Steamer, you have Pacoda. That's usually a little bit later in the offseason. And if the playing time is calculated according to Fangraphs depth charts, which assumes a certain number of plate appearances for each player on each team, given the Zips projections, their current output would be 91 wins. So they're, according to Fangraphs depth chart playing time, already on paper, a 91 win team. Now, the caveat is for these projections, the standard deviation or the normal amount of error around this is about 14 wins. So the way you can maybe better look at this is, okay, they're 91 wins going into the year. Well, 91 minus 14 is 77 wins as their floor. And then, 105 wins if you're getting crazy over there. That's how these work. So that's surprising. The individual player awards, which we can get into, is being carried by third base, first base, now the DH, and starting pitching staff. Do you want me to show these individual player projections, Corey? Do you want to see them?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see them. So here they are. So Happ in left field, 3.7 WAR. PCA 4. Tucker 4.5. Dansby at shortstop 4.9. Nico at second base 4.3. Bush at first base 2.7. Third base. This was a surprising one. Third base with Shaw and Workman 2.7 WAR. Above league average, basically league average. DH Seiya 3.5. Amaya and Kelly at catcher 2.5. Starting pitching 3.1 for Shota, 3.3 for Justin Steele, 1.6 for Tyone, 1.5 for Assad, and then for newcomer Boyd, 2.1. I mean, their lineup right there, unbelievable. They're averaging basically 3.5 WAR at every position, Corey. That's absurd. Last year, they had replacement level production at third base. For the majority of the season at catcher, replacement level production. Their bullpen in May and June, awful, sunk them. Going into the year, those positions are being projected not just at slightly below league average, not even at league average, slightly above league average, in addition to Ian Happ raising his projection, PCA doubling his WAR projection this year, and having a superstar guy with a lower floor end of his projection at almost 5 WAR. It's really surprising to see, quite frankly.
It's exciting.
And they're not done.
Right. And that's kind of the thing. It's like, again, like these projection systems, it's not gospel, and it doesn't mean like, they say maybe 90 wins, so the Cubs are going to win 90 games. But it's again, more just thinking back to previous years and like, why are they being looked at like this? And part of the reason was they don't have these star players, and they have enough questions throughout the roster that outcomes could be in any wide range for certain players, that's where they're going to get looked at. They're going to be looked at as a team that might play a lot of close games and it doesn't as we always talk about, have the ability to consistently blow teams out, and they have solid pitching, but there's holes throughout the rotation or in the bullpen. And that's the stuff they needed to clean up. And so seeing them being looked at in a different light, at least for now, by these systems is representative of how certain players have developed. And then, of course, bringing in a guy like Kyle Tucker to lift this whole thing up. It's nice to see. This is what we asked for, Brendan. And like, assuming, as we just talked about, like that they reallocate that Bellinger money and spend as much of that space between them and the first tier of the luxury tax as they can. Usually they like to save a little bit for in-season moves if they want to go over the trade
in the
deadline.
past, it's been around 10 million or so.
Yeah. So, but that should be able to buy you a good amount of stuff in terms of shoring up this bullpen and this rotation. And if you feel like the offense is in a better place, which it is, and you can think back on these last couple of years, like last year, they blew so many games at the beginning of the year, so many close games that they let get away from them. Now that you have an offense you feel should be better, and you're hoping, again, a guy like Matt Shaw gets an opportunity and
Are you
takes
surprised about the
PCA.
third base projection there? I mean, you're seeing basically 2.7 for guys who have not played Major League Baseball, especially with Shaw leading
kind
that.
of.
I'm surprised.
Well, I mean, sort of. I mean, you know, he's just
from a computer
reviews.
perspective. I mean,
yeah, I mean, from those that have watched him play and just scouts and people that believe in him, I don't know.
But it's the computer. It's not, this is like an
So that's
way.
why I would be a little surprised. But in terms of like just thinking about him, not really. I mean, I obviously I share in the high expectations for him.
So at least for like, if you look on Fangraphs right now, his projection for next season, 504 plate appearances, a 250 batting average. The surprise specifically on his projection is a 21% strikeout rate. I don't think that's going to be that low. That would be his best case outcome, in my opinion. The reason is because he has right now, ending AAA, a like 74-75% contact rate. That's below the major league average. That's just growing pains, going through development, seeing faster stuff in AAA. I would be surprised if he goes to Major League Baseball and all of a sudden is making more contact than he was in AAA, although PCA did that. So, it is possible, but typically you just don't see that.
Yeah. Look, it's just one of those things where we got to see how the rest of the offseason plays out, but this is they've made major strides in basically what we were asking of them. Short of turning themselves quickly into a 95 win on paper team behemoth that is, loosely in the conversation with the Dodgers or whoever for like the juggernaut of the MLB. Like, this is what we were asking. Don't go into the season being looked at by everyone rightfully as a fringe team. You need to be better than that. And you've seen the reason why over these last two seasons in particular. And so still work to go. We'll see where things land, as we break for spring training and break for opening day. But they've positioned themselves a lot better in terms of what we've been asking for. And that is to be looked at, whether it's by pundits, projection systems, whatever, as the favorite in your division that other teams have been running roughshod on for years, that spend way less money than you. And in this particular offseason, like almost, across the board, are getting worse. You're reading about the Cardinals trading off players, like cutting back their payroll. The Brewers have lost, Craig Counsell. They lost Adames this offseason. They lost Corbin Burns last year. Like, we'll see if they replace those things, and I'm sure they'll pull some made-up person out of single A.
St. Louis just moved to Milwaukee, apparently. That's what happened.
Right. Like, they'll pull some random person that was in single A a month ago who
watched Nick Madrigal put it together in Milwaukee.
Don't even say things like that.
I'm just thinking dark, dude.
Oh, man.
You can see.
Don't even say stuff like that. So I'm sure they'll, not just like wither away and die like we would all hope. But at the end of the day, like, you need to be putting yourself in a position. You got to be flexing your muscle at some point. You're the juggernaut organization in this division, and you got to act like it sometimes. And that doesn't always mean, having a $350 million payroll or whatever the Mets or Padres or Dodgers are doing, but
nice.
It means like it should, but it also can mean positioning yourself as clearly the best team. Whatever path you have to take to get there, that should be you, unless we're talking about the years we've gone through in the past where like the clear intention is we're rebuilding, like we got to gut it to, just the floorboards and whatever. Like, and that's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it was time to be done being projected as an 82 win team, that if a couple things go wrong, you're under 500, and rightfully so. And so I'm very happy that they seem to position themselves otherwise.
We're still not quite there yet,
Sure.
away from that
Yeah.
that dumbness, right? So I mean, you can look at the Zips and the Fangraphs playing time at 91 wins. Other systems with different playing time projections, 86, 87 wins. Like for me personally, you want to get 95-ish or so, and maybe the Cubs could do that. They would probably have to go above that first tier for luxury tax to be like a 95 win team. But the fact that we're even saying that, hey, you want to think crazy, you want to think optimistic, it's right there. We've heard reports even today about Pablo Lopez in trade discussions.
Yeah.
Apparently, they're asking the world, the Minnesota Twins for Pablo Lopez. They were talking about the Cubs with the Marlins for Luzardo. Those are dead. Luzardo's not coming over. Had a stress reaction in his lumbar back. Didn't really care for that, to be quite honest with you. That's fine.
Well, and I wonder if that's part of why it's not happening.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak for myself. I got a sore back. I can't pitch. I don't want to be traded now.
I will say, and if there's a lot of reports that those talks are done, the Cubs have moved on. Again, you never know what to believe or not, but there's a pretty, for as much smoke as there was around Kyle Tucker before it happens, there was a lot of smoke around Luzardo, and
I wonder if same medicals were shared. They're like, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, those same people are saying like, yeah, this is done. The Cubs have moved on to other stuff. I will say, I was kind of into that one. I know you shared some concern on that, with the health and stuff like that. I did like the idea of taking a bit of a swing in terms of like, this guy's dealt with injuries.
I was surprised you were into that. That one did take me away a little bit, because that seems like anti-Corey. In terms of, you want like the surefire guy, and for me, I never thought Luzardo was.
I suppose. That. Well, I guess I don't know how much of that is available, and they just got one. He's not a pitcher, but enough. They did just get the surefire guy in Kyle Tucker. Like, he is who he is, and had he not fouled the ball off his shin, he would have been doing this last year for the full year. And as we've discussed, like, he was so, he only played in 70 games or whatever it was, for a pitiful 4 WAR in those 70 games or whatever it was. So I just liked the idea of, in the position that they're in, especially with the starting staff that they already have, like, take a swing and see if you get Luzardo healthy, and maybe you get a kind of pretty cheap lottery ticket almost. You already have Boyd in the fold. And you have some guys on this staff who you need to be careful with their innings, and these aren't John Lester type guys that are going to go out there and pitch 200 innings for 7 straight seasons. And so I thought the idea of you've brought in Boyd, make this trade for Luzardo. It certainly wouldn't be as expensive as something like Pablo Lopez, or I saw today that maybe they called on Sandy Alcantara in Miami as well, and just other guys. But I was kind of like, hey, load up the pitching staff with arms, and let Craig and Tommy Hotovy figure out how to divvy them up and try to maximize some of these guys that you wouldn't be counting on to throw 180 innings and see what happens.
Would you have preferred Castillo versus Luzardo? Castillo, $22 million. Okay.
Yeah, it's a slightly different thing, but obviously reliable. Yeah.
You may have to limit your back end bullpen. Yeah. I think for me, I would go more certainty. We talked about this offline. The idea of Castillo was dampened by a velocity decrease, the perception of a velocity decrease with Luis Castillo. And the degree to which that's impactful, I think, was maybe oversold by some fans. And so if you look at his velocity in 2022, he averaged 97 miles per hour. 2023 went down to 96.3. 2024 went down to 95.6. It's averaging 96 miles per hour. And we're worried about a velocity decrease. Your boy, John Lester, Corey, averaged 93.3 miles per hour in the early 2010s. Okay. In 2016, he averaged under 92. And then if you look at the year for Lester, the last year he averaged over 92.5 was just before he was acquired by the Cubs. Just 3 years later, he was throwing 1.5 miles per hour slower. That was 2017. And he went on and persisted to throw 30 starts with ERAs 3.5 and under. And that wasn't going from 97 to 96 or 95. That was going from, again, early 2010s from 93.5 down to like 91. So I think the velocity decrease for Castillo is overblown, especially given his high peak, and he has 4 pitch types that he uses frequently across games. For me personally, I look at Castillo, that would be my preferred candidate. Now, Pablo Lopez is in the discussion. Now he's my preferred candidate. But if we can maybe, I guess, soften the trade package for getting someone like Castillo, which it doesn't appear as if they're like actively involved in, to be clear, but it did seem like that maybe a few weeks ago, that would be kind of my preferred path forward. Getting someone like a Pablo Lopez or a Luis Castillo.
Oh, I think the package would obviously be a lot steeper, and I'm sure people have different preferences. But if you're able to get a, legitimate, like, maybe not like ace level guy, but a 1 to 3 level starter.
Yeah,
like
someone who throws 30 starts a year,
like,
dude. That's so valuable.
This team looks very, very strong. Like, we saw this starting group put up really good numbers. Now, again, you need to at least consider, it's Shota's second year. How does he adjust? How does the league adjust to him, et cetera, et cetera?
Taillon's aging.
Sure. But like, this group was really solid last year, and that included giving a lot of spot starts to different guys coming into the rotation, going to the bullpen, coming back to the rotation, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I think adding a reliable, like really strong starting pitcher to this group, like, this team looks pretty good. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, there's definitely things that can go wrong. There's definitely questions, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And is it like the absolute best iteration they could have possibly put out there? I don't know. Like, in theory, not. But you'd feel really good about this team. I mean, if you were rolling, even in your example, like, let's say Pablo Lopez, because that's kind of the pitcher du jour, for these rumors and things like that. Like, Justin Steele, Shota, Pablo Lopez, Jameson Taillon, like,
I know
that looks really good. And then that's not even considering, like, again, who knows who you'd have to trade. So who's still left after
maybe like Cade Horton making his debut if you don't trade him, or like Jordan Wicks.
If you don't trade Javier Assad, Jordan Wicks, like, these guys were really strong for you and showed you a lot of promise and potential. So I think it would make the team really strong. I do hope that they continue to look at that market via trade. How do you feel about any of the potential free agent options left? Would you be interested in Walker Buehler? Would you be interested in Corbin Burns if the contract was right? Or
I'm more interested in the guys in the trade market. Walker Buehler, injury concerns, did not have a good regular season. Stuff is dwindling. Corbin Burns, the expensive price, but sign me up for Corbin Burns. But given how the Cubs have operated, likely not going to happen. Jack Flaherty, similar discussion, injury concerns, had a great postseason, has good stuff. Cubs were interested in Flaherty at one point. For me, it's Pablo Lopez or Luis Castillo. But I mean, it comes from an innings projection. I want innings, and I want guys who don't walk batters, and I want guys who have multiple pitch types. And all those two guys, they check off all those boxes. Pablo Lopez, a walk per 9 last season in Minnesota, under 2, a K per 9 on average over the last 2 years of over 10 batters per 9. So he's walking guys under 2 base on ball per 9 rate, and he's striking out over 10 guys per game. So that to me is what you want in your top shelf guy. Only 28 years old, only making $18 million per year, under team control for 3 more years. You have to give up the world for Pablo Lopez, justifiably so. And that would probably be an uncomfortable package of prospects should the Cubs actually seriously consider that. But free agents, yeah, I'm interested, but I think my attention goes to the trade market currently.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with you. I mean, certainly, like, I would be interested in either Buehler or Burns. I would assume that
prices. It's just the injury
Yeah,
concern.
no,
and
I
the
mean, look,
innings
like, I don't know,
projection.
maybe we get lucky and Burns is in a Marcus Stroman spot from years ago where he's willing to sign some sort of short-term deal with opt-outs or things like that, and Jed can kind of let somebody come to him, so to speak. But I like a lot of the potential. And I think, really with a lot of this, people are going to have their preferences. I know, some people were looking at, I think Hobie Milner, who signed on Thursday evening, as a guy who had been with Counsell in Milwaukee and kind of liked him. So he's off the market, but there's a lot of like solid guys. And I think everybody's going to have their preference or, love certain guys or feel that they fit the Cubs organization and things like that. I think to me, Brendan, like Jed went and got the star. That's what my biggest ask was. Like, just spend the money and make the team better. That's pretty much where my ask lands. I expect them to. I would be very surprised, like, if they just use that Bellinger money to just do nothing. I just don't think that makes any sense for a lot of reasons.
They have, even if they're 50 under, they'll be around 10, 15 underneath that first tier. They're going to spend at least 20,
so I
30.
think like there's a lot of different ways to go about this. There's a lot of players that you could plug in here. And I think there's, a lot of, there's a question of like, how does Jed see this? Does he see the priority as being like the bulk of that money, whether it's via trade or free agency you're bringing in? Like, should that be devoted to another starter? Should be devoted to another reliever, multiple relievers?
There's a lot of good relievers in the market too.
There was, loose. I don't think they were ever connected to it, but I know like Ken Rosenthal made that, kind of jab at Tom Ricketts about it, like in relation to like Alex Bregman. Is Jed looking at more offense? Like that part we don't know, but I think they have a good chunk of money, even under what their budget might or probably is. And it can make this team better. Yep. And I think I would be very surprised if they use it. I sat there and said, I don't think they used it like effectively. I think as long as they use it and they're bringing in guys that shore up these areas that we know are the areas they're still looking at, I think they'll be in a good place. And I think we can be ready to ride.
I think some of that money, likely given where the starting pitching market is in the current situation, is probably going to be spent on like short-term reliever deals, and they're going to risk it that way. Looking at, Tanner Scott, Jeff Hoffman, Kirby Yates. Jeff Hoffman and Scott probably going to get multi-year contracts. Maybe Kirby Yates, 38-year-old, soon to be, great year with Texas previously, 61 games, a 1.1 ERA, high K per 9. I think that's where the money's going to go.
I like AJ Minter.
I like AJ Minter. He can bring back a lot of guys you're familiar with. Your guy, Leclerc, in Texas, bring him over. Paul Sewald, for instance, D-backs closer a couple of years ago. There's options. Andrew Chafin can come back to Chicago. There's ways forward to boost the number of projected innings in the bullpen by spending more money. And I think given their current projection in their financial situation, it's more likely that money gets put forth towards that back end of the bullpen.
Yeah, and it works for me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we have for you. We'll keep an eye on all the rumors. Obviously, if we need to do, emergency shows, I think we were live 7 minutes after Kyle Tucker was acquired. I can't remember if they did a Bellinger one too. They might have, but that was probably within 5 minutes or something like that. At the end here, do you want to give just a shout out to our guy, Ryan Herrera, and say thank you for all of his work. It was a pleasure working with him, talking with him, and, more importantly, just becoming a friend of his. So wishing him all the best in whatever is next, and a sincere thank you for his time with us and the shows we did together, and his work at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. So all the best to our guy, Ryan Herrera. I think that's what we have for you. So Brendan and I will talk to you again next Friday. We'll see if there's more rumors, more deals. And if Jed wants to bring another superstar to beautiful historic Wrigley Field, sign me up. Kyle Tucker's here. Sammy Sosa's back. I don't know. Maybe it's a good time to be a Cubs fan again. We'll see. We'll see.
Put John Lester in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for your support of Brendan and I. We will talk to you again soon. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.